We are in this series called True Stories, and what we're doing as a church is we're taking this entire year and we're going through stories of the Old Testament, because for many of us, we've forgotten the stories if we knew them, and many others in our church. Word of Life is kind of a unique place. There's many people in our church that have been in church less than 1 or 2 years of their entire life. So we want to equip you and teach you these stories, these true stories, because they can become foundational in the work that God wants to do in your lives. All right, so where we left the story off last week was with the Tower of Babel. And if you remember, the Tower of Babel happened because a group of people that God had told to be fruitful and spread out throughout the whole world. God wanted humanity after the flood. He was giving them a do-over. He was giving them an opportunity to go again and to fulfill His purpose for humanity in the world. So He said, I want you to spread out. Don't huddle up together, but spread out and go do the work that I have called you to do. Go make this world like the Garden of Eden. Have lots of kids and train your kids in godliness and teach them to do my work in the earth. Well, what they do? They decided to haul up to build a city and a tower that would reach to the heavens. It said they wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted to build something in their own strength and their own ability that would show God, we got this. We don't need you. We can handle this on our own. What did God do? He came down and said, nope, this is not my plan. You don't want to be dispersed, but you're going to be. He confused their languages so that they began to spread out throughout the whole world. That's where we're picking up our story today. Genesis chapter 11 says, now these are the generations of Terah. Now Terah is in the direct line from Adam. I think this is 10, 12, or 11 generations. I don't remember the math on it. But he's a great-great-great-great-great-grandchild of Adam himself. It says Terah fathered 3 guys, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran fathered a guy named Lot. Now Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred, the Ur of the Chaldeans. Now, if you remember, Ur of the Chaldeans is what we know as modern-day Iraq, okay? It's where the Mesopotamian Empire arose and flourished. It's where the Babylonians, King Nebuchadnezzar, and some of those individuals from the Bible were at. This is where they were coming from. It says, Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. The name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, and there was some interrelation stuff going on, all right? This is okay. This isn't inbreeding back then. This was the way things were done because there wasn't as many people to choose from, okay? It wasn't until generations later that God stopped this practice. This was not, it wasn't like West Virginia, okay? This was just like, it's not, you know what? I'm not trying to be rude with that, but that type of stuff, you hear about it. So anyway, moving forward. I'm from Southern Missouri. Everybody asks me, so are your parents related before they were married? No. Because I was born in Iowa. I don't know about everybody. But here's the big thing. Verse 30 says, now Sarai was barren. She had no child. So I need you to remember that because that comes into a very, very big part of this story later on. You see, barrenness, especially in the Old and New Testaments, in the time of the Scriptures, barrenness was a big deal for 2 reasons. Number one, if you didn't have children, then when you got older, you were in trouble because children were your 401k. They were your retirement plan. This is why people had so many kids back then, because when they got older and they needed help, they were going to depend on their children to take care of them. All right? My mom has 1 kid, so she's on her own, right? I'm kidding. Barrenness was also looked upon as a sign of sinfulness. So if a woman was barren, then people looked at her, and that woman carried a great amount of shame upon her throughout her entire life. Because people looked at a barren couple and said, oh, God has turned His back on them. Obviously, they have done something to earn God's displeasure. And so barrenness was an outward sign to other people of a shame and a guilt for something. Genesis 11:27 continues. It says, now Terah took his son Abram and his nephew Lot, his grandson Lot, and his daughter-in-laws, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there instead. So they were on their way to Canaan, but it was not yet God's timing for them to go. Terah was not the one that was going to take them into the promised land. It was going to be Abram. Now, if the names are confusing you, this Abram was later named Abraham. So, if you ever heard that song, Father Abraham had many... Yeah, okay, you guys can do it. All right, good. It was not time yet. It says the days of Terah were 205. Terah died in Haran. One of the things that stuck out to me when I read that this morning is that many times God will wait until something dies, until we put something to death, before He moves us on into the things that He has for us. There are times when we will have distractions. There are times when there are things in our life that will prevent us from being able to move forward into the good things God has planned for us. And it is not until those things die from the inside out that God will say, okay, now they're ready. So if you find yourself constantly on the edge and you're just like, all right, God, you've told me that this is going to happen. You've told me I'm going to get married. You've told me I'm going to get this kind of job. You've told me I'm going to have this type of thing go on in my life. Why am I not there? Well, sometimes we need to look within and say, okay, God, is there something? Is there something that needs to die before I'm able to move forward? So Terah dies in the land of Hanan. Genesis 12, 1 through 2. It says, now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. You see a theme there? You see a statement that's repeated over and over and over again? In this promise to Abraham, God says 5 times, I will. Do you think He was trying to get a point across? You see, today's story is the antithesis of what we read about last week. Today's story is about God blessing us and moving us forward. Last week's story, the Tower of Babel, is the story of man trying to move himself forward without God's blessing. The story of Abraham is God saying, I'm going to bless you and I'm going to move you forward. We want to be children of Abraham, not children of Babel. Amen? So let's look at this promise and let's break it down. The first thing He says is, now Abram, I want you to go from your country and your kindred and your father's house. You see a word again repeated there 3 times? What is it? Your. So what's God telling him? I'm about to move you out of your comfort zone, your country, your people, your father's house. In other words, your sense of identity, your sense of safety, your sense of control. I'm going to move you out of that place and I'm going to take you somewhere where you feel out of control. I'm going to take you someplace where you're not in power. I'm going to take you somewhere that it may not feel comfortable, because it's when we go into the place that we're not comfortable that we can only depend on God. If all we ever do is stay where we feel like we got this, then nothing is ever going to move forward. It's when we step out of that place where we're in control that God can take over and we look to Him fully. He says, and I will make of you a great nation. I will make you a great nation. Now here's the problem. Abram's wife is barren. She's barren. What do you do with that? I mean, now all of a sudden, and guys, this is dangerous, because so many times God will give us a promise and all of a sudden we'll start spiritually justifying what God might have meant. Because what He really means is clear, but we're like, well, that can't happen. I mean, obviously God doesn't mean that, so I'm going to make it mean something else. I'm going to make it less than what He said because that seems more manageable. God isn't a God of what's manageable. God is a God of what's impossible. God is the one who can step up and do things that you and I cannot do. God says, I will show you where to go. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great. What did they say at Babel? At Babel they said, in order for us to be in charge, in order for us to be in control, we will make a name for ourselves. God says, I will show you, I will make you, and I will make your name great. If you want to do great things for God, if you want to have a great marriage and a great family and a great job and a great life for God, then you have to let God make your name great. But some of us are so busy and focused and distracted and making a name for ourselves that we never get out of our own ways long enough to allow God to get in there and start making the name great for His glory. He says, and I will bless you so that you will be a blessing. Now I want you to see this. Why is God going to show him? Why is God going to take him? Why is God going to make him a great nation? And why is God going to make His name great? So that he can be a blessing. You see, so many people, so many times I myself have started to allow God to do something great, but then I took the accolades. I took the glory, I took the benefits, and I used them all for me instead of for what God was really trying to do, which was to be a blessing for other people. I wanted the fame. I wanted the popularity. I wanted the material blessing. I wanted, and I stopped depending on God. And after a while, I was like, all right, God, thanks for getting the boat started here, but I'll take the wheel from here. Thanks for starting to get it rolling, but I got it now. And all of a sudden, things started to fall apart. He says, I will bless those who bless you. I will dishonor those who dishonor you. I will curse. So what does this say? I'm going to bless those that come alongside of you and help you. But there will be a time that you will have detractors. There will be people that try to get in the way to stop what I'm doing in your life. You will have naysayers. You will have problems. You will have people that get in your way and get in your face and try to stop you. So what are you supposed to do? I'm supposed to get revenge. I'm supposed to tell them what's up. I'm supposed to hit back harder than they hit me. No, God says, revenge is mine. I will curse them. So you don't have to spend your time worrying about revenge. You don't have to spend your time worrying about putting out rumors about the people rumoring about you. You don't have to spend your time trying to get even. You don't even have to spend your time trying to defend yourself, because God will take care of your enemies. God will do it. And he says, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. You know what this is? This is a promise of Jesus Christ. Because the reason that God chose Abram was not because he was the best man. We'll see that in a minute. The reason that God chose Abram was not that he was the most qualified man. We'll see that in a minute. The reason that God chose Abram was because he was a willing man. And God was going to use humanity to bless humanity. This is the way God has always done it. You see, so many times we get this confused. We think, all right, God's going to show up and do a miracle, so I'm just going to wait around. You guys ever heard the story about the man that drowned? There was a great flood, and this guy climbed up on top of his roof. And a guy in a rowboat came by, and he said, get in before the floodwaters come. And he says, oh no, God's going to do a miracle and save me. A couple hours later, the water got higher, and the man's still up on the roof, and a guy in a speedboat comes by and says, come on, get in, the waters are coming up. And he said, no, God's going to do a miracle and save me. A couple hours later, the water is up to this guy's chest, and he's standing there, and a helicopter comes by and drops a rope, and he says, climb up, get in. And the guy says, no, I am okay, God is going to save me. The guy drowns and goes to heaven, and he says, God, why didn't you save me? And he says, I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter. What else do you need? Right? God used Abram to be the father of a people that would 2,000 years later produce Jesus Christ, the Son of God. God's timing is not our timing. Now the word also says that to the Lord a day is 1,000 years. So for God it was 2 days. For humanity it was 2,000 years, and we're sitting here, we're the only ones going like this to God. Anytime now. And God's going, no, not any time, my time. Not any time, my time. John 15:16 says, this is God now. God says, you didn't choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, He may give it to you. We need to get it out of our heads that somehow we're behind all of this. God says, you didn't choose me, silly rabbit. I chose you. I appointed you. All you did was stumble into the appointment, naked, blind, scared, and unaware. But I'm the one that's going to do it through you. Luke 22:41 says, now Jesus withdrew from his disciples a stone's throw, and he knelt down and he prayed. And here's what he prayed. Father, if you are willing, remove this cup or remove this difficulty from me. Yet, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. You see, this is the foundation of anything that God will do in our lives. Not my will. Your will be done. Genesis 12:4 says, so Abram went. You know, that's always the key. If God tells you to do something, that's always the key. If God tells you to go, you go. You don't sit around and try to figure it out. You don't sit around and try to think it all through. You don't try to sit around and make sure everything's lined up. If God tells you to go, you go. God told Abraham to go, and he went, as the Lord had told him. But that's the other part, right? Friday, we had the Workers' Worship Conference here. It was fantastic, wasn't it? And it was awesome. Phil Vischer, the creator of VeggieTales. You guys ever seen VeggieTales? He was one of the speakers and just blew my mind. I'd heard him speak this message last year at a conference, but he brought it again. And one of the things that he did was talk about how so many times we misunderstand moving in God's promises and moving forward. He said sometimes we do need to sit still, but when we're sitting still, we need to be listening. There's a difference between sitting still and doing nothing and sitting still and listening to God. So when we sit still, we need to make sure that we are actively listening to what God is telling us to do. And so Lot, his nephew, went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Now, I'm 34, so I have a hard time referencing 75. There might be like one or two people in here that are 75 plus. But that's pretty young, right? I mean, most people live to be like 200 now, right? No, 75 is approaching older age. I'm not saying old age, older age. 75 years old. And it says, he departed from Haran to go to the promised land. Abram took Sarai, his wife, and his nephew, and all of their possessions, all that they had, all the people that they had acquired, and they set out for the land of Canaan. You see, when God tells us to do something, it's all or nothing. You don't just take part of it. You know what one of the biggest hindrances in my faith walk has been over the years? Is God will tell me to do something, and I hedge my bets. No, that's a bad way of saying it, but I'm trying to make it relatable. You know what it means to hedge your bets? It means that you hold some back just in case. So many times I've hedged with God. Instead of going all in because the Lord is telling me to go all in. Some of y'all are like, is Pastor Tanner saying I should go gamble? No, I'm not. But if you win, 20% goes to the church. And if you really want to make God happy, 5% goes to the pastor. That is a joke, all right? That's all some of y'all are going to hear today, and you're going to be confused. Don't hear that. Tawana, you can edit that part out later. We got to stop holding back. You see, Abram went, he took everything. He put everything he had into it. You know, this is one of the reasons why Pastor Linda impresses me so much. She took an early retirement and out of her own resources supported Heart of Hope for years. That's why I believe in the cause, because I believe in the person who started it, because she went all in. She didn't hold anything back. It says, when they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. So Abraham gets there, and he begins traveling through the land. And you know what he discovers? There's some big folks here. And I'm not talking like Mark Tanner size, like 6'3". The Bible tells us in Numbers chapter 13 that giants lived there. You see, later on, when the children of Israel came back to this place, it says they gave the children of Israel, this is Numbers 13, they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. You know what that means? They were giants. They were huge. It says, there we saw the giants. The descendants of Anak came from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, so we were in their sight. So as Abraham's walking through the land, you know what he's seeing? He's seeing these people's grandparents. There's giants. Well, if God has called you to go into a place and you're a quarter of the size of everybody else, and they've got these huge cities with their huge walls and all of their resources, and it's you and maybe 30 or 40 other folks, intimidation can set in. But it didn't deter Abram because he knew God had called him. You see, that's what keeps you going. That's what keeps you going when you get into the vision, or when you start following the vision and giants start popping up. Knowing that God has called you. That conviction will keep you going when everything else will try to stop you. Even when the people around you will say, you know what, I think it's time to pack up and go home. Knowing that God has called you is so important. Abram was 75 years old. His wife was barren, and there were giants in the land. What's my excuse? What's my excuse? I mean, Abram's got some odds here. He's a little older than me. God's telling him he's going to have a nation. He doesn't have any kids. And there's giants in the land. Those are not good odds. Vegas was putting him at pretty far specs here. And yet he kept going. Why? Because God had called him. Matthew 19:26 says, Jesus looked at them and he said, with man, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Don't tell me what you can't do. Don't tell me why it can't happen. Don't even tell me why it probably won't happen or what could get in the way. You can ask my wife. I would be an amazing insurance assessor. Because I can walk into a room in a situation and I can tell you every possible thing that could go wrong with it. It is my spiritual gift. The problem is it's not a spirit of the Lord. And a lot of you all have the same gift too. But it isn't the Spirit of the Lord operating, it's the spirit of fear. Because I can tell you every possible thing that could go wrong with a situation. But here's the thing. God does the impossible. So everything could go wrong. I could trip walking down my front stairs and break my neck. Anything can go wrong in any moment but God. It's not me. It's not how careful I am, how good at planning I am, how many resources I have, how good looking I am, how smart I am, how many friends I have, what I got in the bank. None of that stuff matters because it can be gone in a second. What matters is that if God be for me, who can be against me? If I've got God on my side, who's strong enough to stand against Him? Genesis 12:7 says, Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, To your offspring I will give this land. It's not going to be Abram. Remember, there's giants in the land. And it says, to your descendants. So now God is becoming very, 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 very clear. It's not going to be Lot. It's not going to come through his nephew. It's not going to come from a family member. It's going to be your descendants. So you're 75, you're barren, and there's giants, but I'm going to give them the land. Because you sure as goodness can't do it yourself. What is God going to do in your life that you can't do? What does God want to do in your life that you can't do? So, what do you do in response to that? He built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there, he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still moving forward. I want you to see something that shows up in this passage 2 times. Abram built an altar to the Lord. What did they build at the Tower of Babel? They built a tower to their own glory. Abram, being led by God everywhere he went, built an altar to God. You see, that's what we're called to build. We're not called to build structures that show our own greatness or our own might or our own ability. It's not about how smart we are. It's not about the awards we get. It's not about the things that come along, the perks that come along. It's about building altars to the Lord. What is an altar? An altar is a meeting place between men and God. An altar was a light shining in the darkness of that world saying, this is the place that you can meet my God because my God is doing this. When you share a testimony, that's building an altar to the Lord. When you share your faith and tell people about Jesus, that's building an altar to the Lord, because you are creating a place of meeting between that person and the Lord. Everywhere we go, we are called to build these altars to God. We're not called to build towers and dig in and say, this is going to happen my way. Everywhere we go, we build an altar unto the Lord. And you notice that Abram didn't stop. It's so easy once things start going well to stop and just rest there and enjoy it. God wants you to keep moving. God wants you to keep going. He wants you to keep doing the things He's called you to do. We cannot get caught up in success. You know, success can be a killer, because one of the number one things that success makes us stop doing is calling on the name of the Lord. What did Abraham do? When he got there, when he achieved the goal, because remember, the goal was getting to Canaan. When he got there, he built an altar and he called on the name of the Lord. So many times we get success and we just say, yes, I made it. I'm going to take a nap. That's not what God has. With these last 5 minutes, I want to share something with you that to me is one of my favorite things about the Bible. You see, in just about any other religious text that you'll ever read, and I use that word religious just for a descriptive, because Christianity isn't about religion, it's about relationship. But out of any other text that's out there, the Bible's by far the most transparent. Every other text you read makes these people seem perfect and awesome and glorious. The Bible lets out all the issues. I mean, you read through the Bible and you're like, how did God use any of these people? They were a straight up mess. You know why that's encouraging to me? Because I'm a straight up mess. I can be a straight up mess without Jesus running things. Abram was far from perfect. We see that in this story. It says, now there was a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to live there, for the famine was severe. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife. Now, I cannot imagine having this conversation with my wife. If any of you guys are reading this story right now, you're going to go, uh-oh. Because you know this is an uh-oh moment. This is a bad move, dude moment, all right? Honey, I know you're beautiful. In fact, you're pretty smoking hot. And when the Egyptians see you, they're going to say, this is his wife? Then they're going to kill me, but they're going to let you live. So just tell them that you're my sister. That it may go well with me because of you. Forget about your feelings. Forget about your identity. Forget about our marriage. Forget about all those things. You know that covenant we made before us and God? Just forget about all that for a time, because I want things to go well for me, and I don't really know what's going to happen to you, but I want it to go well for me. Is that okay, babe? Uh-oh. It says, when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram, and Abram got all kinds of good stuff out of the deal. So up until this point, Abram's got a cape on, right? It's like, I will follow you, God, wherever you cape me. But now he's in Egypt, and he's like, honey, can you do this for me? Can you provide my strength? Can you be my shield? Can you be my protector? He's not trusting in God anymore. He's trusting in what he has and what he can do. He's trusting in deception. How many times when things start going wrong do we start trying to use deception to protect us instead of relying on God? Jeremiah 1:8 says, do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you, says God. Don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of your boss. Don't be afraid of your coworkers. Don't be afraid of your family. Don't be afraid of your friends. Don't be afraid of the people at your kids' school. Don't be afraid of them, because I'm with you to deliver you. You see, we have to stop believing that we have to be perfect for God to use us. He is looking for someone who is willing. Abram was far from perfect. This is only the first time he pulls this trick, by the way. This becomes a habit. He's like, well, it worked the first time. This becomes a habit for Abram. He's not a perfect man. He's just a willing man who at the right times, the important times, put his hope and trust in what God told him. We don't have to be perfect for God to use us. We have to be willing. And as we become more and more willing for God to use us, righteousness comes with that. Because holiness is important. Finally, Genesis 12, 17 through 20. But things are going well for Abram, but the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife?" By the way, she was his half-sister. A little bit of a white lie there, right? "Now then, here is your wife, take her and go." And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. How many of you, or how many people that you know, have stopped going to church because someone treated them like garbage? Yeah, I remember our conversation. How many of you stopped going to church, or how many of you know someone that won't come to church when you invite them because they got hurt in a church? Being used of God is not justification for using others. Being used by God is not justification for us to use others for our own benefit. This is what happens. You see, Abram was willing to use his wife. He was willing to use Pharaoh so that he could be blessed, so that it could go well for him, but God afflicted Pharaoh. You see, when we're working for God, but we're also living for ourselves, we will hurt the people around us. And that is not what we are called to do. Abram was called to be a blessing to all nations, not to bless himself at the expense of other nations. As a follower of Jesus, I am called to serve Him, to love Him, and to serve and love others for His glory, for the benefit of them, and not just so what I can get out of it. Church is not for us. Church is for them. The them meaning everybody who's not in here with us. That's why we come, is to get filled up, to go out and to love them and to bring them in, to show them the love and the grace and the mercy and the goodness that we have received, because it's not for us. It's for all of us. 1 Peter 2:12 says, "Keep your conduct among unbelievers honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation." You know what this is saying? Live right out in the world. And the world will attack you because of the way you're living, but when they attack you, our God will take over. Our God will deliver us. And when God shows up, they will speak well of you, because they will be reminded of who you really are and who you belong to. Final verse. Psalm 119, 112. "I will incline my heart to perform your statutes forever, to the end." This is our prayer for today, guys. This is our prayer. This is the desire of heart that God wants every single one of us to have. Dear God, I incline my heart. That means, God, I turn my heart. I focus my heart. I direct my heart into exactly what you want me to do. I want to go where you want me to go. I want to do what you want me to do. I incline my heart to your purposes, to your plan, and to your glory forever, to the end. No matter what comes up, no matter what the obstacles, no matter how big the giants are, God, I am yours. Use me, take me, make my name great for your sake. Because guess what? If God makes your name great, He's making His name great. If you make your name great, you're not doing anything. But if God makes your name great, He's making His name great, because your name is associated with His name. If we seek to make our own names great, we will destroy those around us, and we will bring God's name through the mud. That is not God's plan or purpose for us.